I want to welcome everybody to our second session of our graduate school application professional development. And if you were here last week, you may have heard a little bit about who we are. I just want to give a little bit of background for those of you who may not know. So the LS-PAC Models Center is a Lewis-Stokes Regional Center of Excellence. And our goal is to prepare historically underrepresented students in STEM for academic careers. And to do that, we develop and disseminate best practices for diversifying the STEM academic workforce. So that includes mentoring, professional development, network building. We have a conference. We also have an app and a website that we are currently developing that will allow mentors and mentees to connect with one another. So this is all possible because we have a great team, and we have several individuals who support us in various ways. Our PI is Dr. Isaiah Warner, who's the Vice President for the Office of Strategic Initiatives at LSU. Even though we're housed at LSU, we serve folks from all over the country, and we have some opportunities for undergraduates, graduate students, postdocs, and early career faculty as well. So people who are in our program can have the opportunity to be mentored. They can receive access to professional development. They can meet and network with leading professionals and scholars within their field. And they can also be a mentor if they would like to be a mentor. And so this is open to undergraduates, grad students, postdocs, and early career faculty, as I mentioned. So we really run the gamut there. And this is how our mentoring model works. For example, if you are an undergraduate student, you could have a mentor, but you can also be a mentor to other undergraduate students. Graduate students could mentor graduate students and undergraduate students, and postdocs could mentor postdocs, graduate students, and undergraduate students. And as you go up the ladder, you'll be able to mentor more folks. So there's peer mentoring as well as professional hierarchical type mentoring as well. Both are built in. So if you are someone who is an undergraduate, I know that's the main audience for today, please check out our options if you have not done so already. I'm going to put this link in the chat in just a second, and you can check out a little more about our program. We have an orientation coming up on Wednesday, October 13th, 12:30 to 1:30 p.m. Central Time. So we hope that you'll join us for that. And whoops, that's the wrong slide. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Miss Melissa Crawford. I think she has prepared a really great, comprehensive presentation for everybody in terms of what are all the steps that you need to be thinking about when you're applying to graduate school. So we're really excited. And Melissa, please take it away whenever you're ready.
All right. Happy Friday, everybody. I'm going to pull up these slides here. Great. All right, can everybody see that? Okay. Awesome. Yeah. So I am excited to be here with you all to share this information with you. This is my heartbeat. I love helping students through this process. And today you're going to get a lot of information. So if you don't have a pen already, for those of you who were with us last week when we had our outstanding panelists of former PhD students, also some current PhD students, definitely check out the recording. But I mentioned in the last session that anytime you have the opportunity to get information from the webinar meetings, always have a pen and paper handy because you never know what gems you might get in those sessions. So I'll give you a moment just to grab a little something. I will have some points of interaction here, so I definitely encourage you guys to engage, drop comments in the chat if you have questions and so forth as we go. All right. And so as you can see, the title is Stand Out to Get In, Demystifying the Graduate School Application Process. And so we are going to cover a lot, like I said, and the goal of this webinar is to provide you with the tools that you will need to apply for graduate school, to obtain funding, and just to be prepared overall. And so just to get things kicked off, I am curious. I know if you plugged in, I'm assuming most of you plugged in because you want to go to grad school. So I'm curious to know, what is your top reason for pursuing graduate school? So if you guys could just take this poll that just popped up. It's an anonymous poll, but we just kind of want to get a feel for why people are wanting to pursue. Okay, so I see a good bit of you want to nurture your intellectual curiosity and discover your passion. Yes, it's necessary for your profession, I see. Wanting to expand career options and prospects. Awesome. We have a few seconds left on this. Anybody parents are making them go to grad school, or it's just like the next step? You know, some people, they decide to go for that reason, and we'll talk a little bit about that. Whatever you decide, it's important to know. And I ask that because you have to know your why you want to go to graduate school. It is a journey. And if you don't know why you're embarking upon that journey, it could be a difficult journey if you don't have that why to keep you grounded. And one of the reasons not to go to grad school would be just because somebody made you go, or because there's nothing else to do, because it'll be a long time for you, or someone might not be successful if they're going for the wrong reasons. I think most people have voted. So it looks like the majority want to nurture their intellectual curiosity and discover their passion, which is fantastic. That's awesome. And some of the other reasons that people may choose to go, we've already seen that it's necessary for your profession. So maybe you might be in a field where you have to absolutely get a graduate degree. There's not many job opportunities at the bachelor's level. And so you have to go in order to have some sort of career in that area. And some people just might want to achieve personal goals. I know people who they have known all their lives they wanted to get a graduate degree, or maybe they've been surrounded by family and friends who pursued higher ed and they were, you know, inspired to do so. You may want to just fulfill your passion for learning, as most of you have said, or research. You might want to specialize in an area or become an expert. You might want to just generate new knowledge and discoveries, right? Because, you know, in graduate school, you have the ability to do that. And you also might just want to strengthen some of your credentials or become more marketable. And we'll talk a little bit about that as well. With going to graduate school, you can position yourself for professional growth and advancement. You increase your earning potential, and we'll talk about that in a little bit as well. And you can impact so many generations coming behind you through discovery of, you know, new cures, new technology, early detection methods, depending on what area you're choosing. And I'm speaking mainly from a STEM perspective. All right. So we will close that out. Those are results there. Let's see. All righty. So when you're deciding why you want to go, some things that you can consider are your short and long-term goals. That can be very helpful in helping you to determine your why. And then will that advanced degree, how is it going to help you obtain those goals? And then how can you show that you're willing to invest the time, the effort, and the expense required for a graduate study? Now let's debunk some myths. So we know why people choose to go, but sometimes students often get discouraged by some of these myths from pursuing graduate study. And so the first one is that students from big undergraduate schools are better qualified. How many of you have heard that before? I have, right? If you hadn't gone to, like, you know, your top schools, you're not going to get into grad school. And that is a huge lie. Successful graduate students don't necessarily come from your big Ivy League or your, you know, top-notch undergrad schools. But what is required to be successful are students who are dedicated, students who have good work ethic, students who have resilience, a passion for learning and research, a drive, they're coachable, You have critical thinking skills, which you may not have those fully developed. You will have them once you go through grad school. And then also students with good emotional intelligence. And so all of that makes for a good graduate student. Now, if you have research training and presentation experience and strong writing skills, those are a plus, but they can also be developed. But by no means do you absolutely have to come from a big undergraduate school. The next myth, that only students with great grades or impressive scores belong in grad school. That's another lie. You know, again, there are students, I know students with average grades, below average grades, who have gone to graduate school, who have finished with their PhDs, and they have wonderful careers, or they may not have had the best GRE score, right? And so don't think because your academic record might not be stellar that you can't apply. Again, this degree is very much so a heavy research degree. And so you could excel in research, whereas you might not be academically strong, but make for a wonderful graduate student. Next, you need to know exactly what you want to study when you start. That's another myth. You might have a general idea of what you want to study, but your exact project, that might change once you get into the program, you take classes, some of your early experiences, that could change. Now, there are some fellowships that might require you to have a little bit more clarity, but you don't necessarily need to know specifically, I want to study this exact specific area within a field. Graduate school is unaffordable and graduate students are broke. How many of you have heard that myth? So just if you haven't found out yet, if you don't know, in STEM, you get paid to do graduate study. Let me say that again, for those of you who may not be aware. If you are pursuing a STEM degree, particular PhD, you get paid to do graduate study. And we'll talk about some of those ways you get paid. So it's definitely something that you can live off of with proper money management and so forth. You can survive. So don't buy into that myth at all. The next one is it's only worth going to grad school if you get into a top ranked program. Again, with this, you have to recognize that, and we'll talk a little bit more about it in depth, but when you apply to graduate school, you're looking at working with a faculty advisor. That's the most important connection there. Not necessarily just if this school is the top in whatever. You want to make sure you carefully choose it based on the advisor you'd be working with. So you don't have to go to a top ranked school or top ranked program to have a meaningful experience or to get the rigor that you're seeking. You can find those in all schools. Many schools have them. The next myth is that you have to pursue graduate study directly after college. For some of you guys who are like, you know, I'm ready, I'm good, my momentum is going, go right ahead and go right after. You're in the mode of going to school. Then there are some who might say, you know what, I need to take a little break, I'm burnt out. Some of you might currently be in your career and you're like, you know, I know that if I had a graduate degree, I could advance more in my career. And so you would go now. So you don't have to go directly after college. But I do suggest that if you decide to take a break, that you live a lifestyle similar to what you would live as a grad student, because while you do get paid, you will not get, you know, your $60,000, $40,000, you know, income that you would get, you know, as a working person. So that's something to consider. And then lastly, a PhD is only for those who want to be a professor. Now, while the LS-PAC models, one of our main goals is to increase the number of underrepresented students pursuing careers within academia, PhDs are also valuable in so many industries. So you don't just have to be a professor. You can work in the government sector. You can work in just regular industry. You can also do some consulting. And so getting a PhD is not just for those wanting to teach at the college level. Now let's look at some of the differences between your undergraduate and graduate school. And I did this slide because sometimes students, they kind of think, okay, well, man, if graduate school is gonna be like my undergraduate, where it was really fast paced, you're taking all these classes, at times it was stressful, I don't wanna go. Now, I'm not saying that graduate school won't be stressful at times, but it's very different in how it's structured. And so at the undergraduate level, a lot of your classes are very foundational. You're taking your basic general classes. Whereas in graduate school, you're going to be enrolling in courses that are highly specific for the area that you're studying. So be specific to your field. Then in undergraduate school, you look at taking, per semester, 5 to 6 classes. You might have a heavy course load. Whereas as a graduate student, you may only take up to 3 advanced level courses per semester. And that's in STEM. I know in some areas that in other fields, it might vary, but generally in STEM, you're not going to be taking the same level in terms of the number of classes. As an undergraduate, you have more projects, more exams, more papers. It seems like there's always something due, right? Well, in graduate school, it's more reading and research focused. So there are fewer projects, there are fewer papers and so forth, but the expectation for the quality of the work that you do submit is higher. You have to make sure that you have good time management skills so that you meet those deadlines and get your work done on time. At the undergraduate level, your classes are a lot larger, whereas in graduate school, you'll have more intimate, more interactive, smaller classes. It gives you more opportunities to engage with your peers and also with your faculty. And then as an undergraduate, it's much more structured. And what I mean by that is, when you're in your undergraduate studies, oftentimes you get your syllabi from your various classes and your faculty member has these nice little deadlines. They might even be kind enough to give you some reminders and things like that. And you have a timeline. Well, in graduate school, it's a little less structured in that way and you have more freedom, but you have to be more responsible. You're not going to have your faculty member chasing behind you, reminding you to do X, Y, and Z. They expect that at that level, you have the maturity and you have the discipline to be able to stay on top of your work. As an undergraduate, the admissions process is pretty simple. You all have gone through that process if you're on this call as an undergraduate. So you know what that's like going from high school to college, filling out your applications and so forth. But it was pretty simple. You may have had to write an essay or something like that and turn in your ACT or SAT scores and submit your application. Well, at the graduate level, it's a little bit more involved, and we'll get into all the details about that. As an undergraduate, you're looking at pretty much getting an entry-level job, typically. Whereas when you complete your graduate degree, you set yourself up to be more marketable for higher level positions, thereby making more money. As an undergraduate, you pretty much learn information through understanding concepts. There's a lot of memorization. Sometimes you do work at some of the high levels, but typically it's more of understanding concepts with a little bit of application. Whereas in graduate school, that focus is going to switch from simply learning and applying to actually creating new knowledge. And so for those of you who are familiar with Bloom's taxonomy in terms of how we learn, you're at those higher levels. You're thinking at the higher levels in graduate school. And then finally, as an undergraduate, you gain a broad knowledge base. But at the graduate level, that's where you're really going to develop that perseverance, strengthen that commitment. You get that specialized expertise. You work on those critical thinking and problem solving skills, time management, as well as communication skills. I like to say you're basically earning a degree in problem solving at the highest level possible. And so we talked about the money, right? Is it worth it? And the answer is absolutely. If I were to tell you I could give you a $30,000 per year raise, would you take it? Of course you would take it, right? So going to graduate school sets you up to earn more. And as you can see, based on the US Bureau of Labor and Statistics, the earning potential for those with doctoral degrees is about $30,000 more than those with bachelor's degrees. And particularly in STEM, you're going to receive better funding, as I mentioned, for a PhD program than you would for a master's or a professional program. So it is worth your investment. And again, if you're going for your PhD, you're not investing any money, right? So you're just investing your time. So think about the payoff for spending, 4 to 7 years, depending on how you matriculate through your program, with the potential to set yourself up to really earn, you know, a higher income and better take care of your family. And so now at this time, we're going to drop in the chat. Dr. Marco has dropped in a Jamboard, and I want you guys to click on that link and share with me some of your feelings and fears before we really get into it, because our goal is to help you kind of ease some of these worries and answer some of these lingering questions. But I'm curious to know, what are your feelings and thoughts about grad school? And if you'd like, somebody said, I'm broke. I love how you wrote it out. Now you can also do the sticky note if you'd like. If you click on, it looks like a little sticky note, you can click on the sticky note and type it. So I'll do a sample and say, I am worried about my writing skills. And then you can add it like that. So let's see what people are saying. That's a good one. Am I smart enough? So we're talking about imposter syndrome, and that's a very real thing. We could have a webinar just on that. And the answer is yes, you are smart enough. And oftentimes, especially as underrepresented students or as women, or if we just don't feel qualified, we sometimes feel like we're not smart enough. But again, graduate school, while there's some, you know, you have to have some intellectual capacity, and obviously you do, because you will have completed your undergraduate degree. It's very much so, how well do you, you know, do research? How good are you at finding things out and, you know, figuring things out and asking the right questions and utilizing your resources and just true grit, you know, sticking to it and persevering no matter what. Can I handle it? Yes. I'm broke, also worried about getting limited. Yes, low GPA. Yes, these are so good. We're going to talk about all of these. This, somebody said, I won't be good enough to compare to the other applicants. So I'm going to pull out just a little biblical scripture here. There's a scripture that talks about it not being wise to compare ourselves among ourselves. And that has stuck with me so much. When we start looking at other people and comparing ourselves to other people, oftentimes, one, we can actually lower the bar because we're assuming that that person, you know, or that they're way up here, they're more advanced, when they may not have the same standards and the same expectations for themselves. So try to avoid that comparison. And I know it's really hard now, especially with the social media age. You know, we're all seeing like, oh, they got this many likes and I only got this many likes. Let's not do that, because it doesn't matter necessarily how you compare it to other people. And I've always lived by the motto, like, I'm always trying to beat my personal best. I'm not necessarily trying to compete against someone else, but I'm going to be the best me that I can be, because that's all I have control over, right? And so resist that temptation to look at other people. Now, you might look and see, okay, well, what kinds of characteristics do certain applicants have when they get in? But don't get into that comparing yourself to other people, because with the right tools, the right resources, the right mentoring, you can be as competitive as anybody, regardless of your background. Someone said they're scared about doing research that has never been done before and not have confidence in my skills. Yes, these are all really good. Worried about the lack of work-life balance that I might have in grad school. Getting admitted and the amount of time reading scientific articles. Yes, these are awesome. Thank you guys for being so transparent in your responses, and we'll deal with that. And so as you can see in this exercise, you're not alone. It is normal to have those fears. I have those fears, and I'll be totally transparent. I am about to embark on this process myself, and almost everything you guys have said on here, I've had those exact same fears. But there's a book called Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway, right? That's what I challenge you guys to do. We're going to push through these fears and we're going to pursue it anyway. And this webinar is going to help you gain the tools that you need to do that. So let's look quickly at just some of the basic milestones in graduate school for those of you who may not be familiar with it. So typically, like I said, you're going to be in grad school for 4 to 7 years. You have some overachievers who, oh, thank you, Dr. Vincent. You have some overachievers who may do it in 3.5 years. I know a few people that have done it, but you have, you know, generally 4 to 7 years to do it. And you start off taking your coursework, and then you move on to selecting an advisor in an advisory committee. And when you do that coursework, like I said, it's not the same coursework that you do as an undergraduate. It's going to help you develop that subject knowledge within a particular area of study. When you choose your advisor, that's also helping you with that knowledge base. That's going to be the person that's going to guide you through the process. And we'll talk a little bit about it later, but you want to look at your advisor well before you go into the program, if possible. Some programs are structured differently where you have to rotate. You do rotations, and then you kind of can choose an advisor after you do different rotations. And then also you would choose your advisory committee. And that advisory committee should be strategically selected, because that's going to be who will advise you on your courses and research. They're going to give, you know, expertise in certain areas. They give you that diverse perspective. They also can promote cross-disciplinary communication. So you could have people on your committee from a field that's totally different from yours, and they can serve different purposes. So make sure that you choose your committee carefully. And then next, you will have a qualifying exam. And you guys, this terminology may vary from school to school, but the general idea of this flow is generally the same, regardless of the institution that you go to. And with these qualifying exams, that's going to test your disciplinary knowledge. Some schools have cumulative exams. I know here at LSU in chemistry, they actually have to take cumulative exams, and they have to pass so many out of so many exams for their qualifying. And then also you would need to pass a research proposal exam. And so this is going to test your capability to actually conduct independent research. Following that, you would apply for candidacy. And at that point, you're saying, you know, I am ready to undertake independent and original research that will result in a dissertation. And you would conduct your research, you will prepare your dissertation. Some students do kind of start research a little bit, or they can kind of get an idea, do some background work early on as well. But you would get into the meat of your research at this stage once you reach candidacy. And then you would pass your final exam, your final oral exam. It's also called defending your dissertation. And then lastly, you would complete any type of post-defense degree requirement. So if there are any edits or anything like that to get your dissertation approved, you would do that at that point. And so very step by step, it's a process, but it's very doable and you can do it. So when should you go to grad school? We kind of alluded to this earlier. You can go immediately. So let's say your professional goal, it requires you to have an advanced degree even before you can begin your career. You want to go to grad school. Or if you want to keep that momentum going, so you are not burnt out, you're like, you know what? And sometimes it may be just taking a break that summer and people are ready to go. If you wait after you work full time, or if you take time off, that's people who are like, you know what? I am burnt out. I don't want to see another book. School is just too much right now. Take a break. But again, live beneath your means. Make sure that you don't spend, you know, too much money or bring your lifestyle up so much that you can't go back down to a grad school income. And then also your employers, they might pay for you to go to school. So that's a good reason to go afterwards. Your program also might prefer experience that you don't currently possess. And then lastly, if you're in a situation where your job is just not fulfilling and it doesn't really allow you a lot of growth at your level, then grad school is definitely a great option for you. And so let's look at some of the admissions decisions. Like, what are they basing things on? First off, the committees are typically, I'm getting tongue-tied, typically comprised of faculty members. And so they're going to look at your whole package. So you have your standardized test scores. So your GRE, sometimes you might have to take a subject test. You also have your transcripts. Both your major, your cumulative GPA are factored in. But then you can have your resume or CV, extracurricular activities, previous work experience that will be factored in. And these letters of recommendation and personal statements or a statement of purpose, those are areas in which you can stand out. This webinar is about standing out. And so these are areas you definitely want to make sure you spend a lot of time crafting. And we'll talk about that in your letters. You want to make sure you carefully select your recommenders because they can make or break your application. And then also if there's an interview, you can also stand out there as well. And then lastly, any research experience through REU programs, which are research experience for undergraduate programs, or any other opportunities, you want to make sure that you include those in your application, as well as any publications and presentations. These are areas that a lot of undergraduates are starting to have now. If you don't have that, it's not the end of the world, especially if you still have time. You have time to present, you have time to secure some undergraduate research. I highly encourage you to do that because that also helps you stand out to your committee. And so as you can see though, there are a lot of things on here. So don't get into the mindset of they're gonna just see my grades. I know somebody talked about the low GPA. Look at all the areas in which you have an opportunity to really make your package shine. And we'll talk a little bit about that. And so in looking at your transcript, in general, for PhD programs, they look at 3.2 or higher. However, listen to me carefully. It doesn't matter what your GPA is, still apply. 3.0s can be acceptable. And then also they look at your grades versus in your major subjects versus your non-major subjects. So don't think just because you have this cumulative GPA, they'll analyze your transcript a little bit more. So did you avoid challenging subjects or did you embrace those and take challenging subjects? Did your grades improve over the last 2 years? This is key, you guys. So you might have had a rocky start as a freshman or a sophomore, but you know what? In your junior and senior year, you really, learned the skills that you needed to learn, and your GPA improved significantly over the last 2 years. They look at that. So even though you may not have the 3.2 or the 3.0, if you've shown improvement, that is a strong plus. Or if you've shown improvement in a 2-semester course. So let's say you got a C in Calculus 1, but then you took Calculus 2 and you got a B or an A. They look at that as well. That's very favorable. But I can't stress enough. I don't care if you have a 2-point-something GPA. Still apply. I know students who have applied, who have gotten into graduate school. I know students who've gotten funding with those GPAs and have achieved their PhDs and are doing awesome in their careers. So don't be discouraged. You can't get into a program that you didn't apply to. All right. And so in looking at the GRE, now there are some programs that are moving away from that. Some fellowships don't require it anymore. However, there are some that still do. So you do want to make sure you prepare for it. You might have to take a subject exam. So like if you're in physics, I know sometimes they require an actual subject exam in addition to the general exam. And so you want to make sure that you find out if you need that so that you can plan accordingly to factor in studying for the subject exam. Make sure you register early and schedule it at least 4 to 6 months, if not longer, if you can, before the application deadlines. So that gives you time because you don't want to take the exam and then you're waiting for your scores to come back and you don't have it in time to be able to submit it to your schools that are asking for it. And then you want to allow at least 2 to 3 months or more of prep time before that deadline. So you're really talking about, almost 9 months or so of time prior to the deadline to really prepare for this. Now, the scores, they will vary in admissions decisions. So some places put a lot of emphasis on the scores while others don't. Some look at certain parts. Some might emphasize, the analytical piece of it more than the verbal piece. And then also scores may be more important for some fellowships when some fellowships don't require them. So it just all depends. And are the scores consistent with your grades or things that are considered? And then lower GPA, lower GREs will be taken into consideration if your grades and your recommendation, again, some of those other components of your package are there, or if you are strong in the research area. They look at all of that. And I've included some helpful websites and free resources to help you in terms of GRE prep. So now let's transition into the actual graduate school portfolio. So Primarily in the portfolio, you're going to want to include a list of targeted schools, at least 10 if you can, 3 to 4 recommenders, and it's not a bad idea to have backups. You're going to need a personal statement or a statement of purpose or intent. You're also going to need to describe any research. So if you conducted undergraduate research, you're going to have to summarize that research. And in some instances, for certain fellowships, you'll have to actually do a research proposal. Somebody asked, are the slides going to be sent? The slides will be disseminated, and Dr. Marco can give more information on how those slides will be disseminated. And it's also being recorded. And so you guys can refer back to the recording. And then also,
we'll put this on our website.
Awesome. And then also you want to have your resume or CV. Now, there are schools that may or may not ask for that. It's not something that may be asked for like in that format, but a resume and a CV is something that you should just have. It is a working document that you should have and keep it going. And you can use that to help you answer some of the other questions in the application. It's pretty much, they'll ask you the same questions that you'll have on your resume and CV. So you want to have that. And then lastly, you want to have a list and a description of the desired funding and fellowships. Now, in choosing a grad school, do your research. So you want to talk to people, talk to professors, talk to professionals in your field of interest. You can find out, where they did their graduate study, things they're interested in. Talk to current graduate students, advisors, and mentors, and also visiting speakers. I know some institutions, they have seminars and things like that. So you can talk to some of the speakers that come to give those talks. You also want to use a variety of sources. And so professional organizations and conferences are great ways to interact with representatives from different grad schools. They're also a great way, I know, like conferences like the Abercamps conference, you can actually get waivers for applying for graduate school because there is often an application fee, and you can go to these conferences and get waivers for applying. Also, research publications and professional journals are good sources. Career centers are good sources. Most universities have those. Graduate school books and guides, major publications might make references to different schools. You can kind of see what kind of research is being done at these different institutions by reading these publications. And then utilize university websites. And also these 2 sites I put up here are very helpful. These are actual like databases that you can go and search for different graduate schools and graduate programs. So definitely take advantage of that. And Google is always your friend. So you can Google if you're interested in a certain area and you want to know if there's a graduate program or a faculty person working in that particular area. It's a simple Google search. Now, you should also consider some educational things and personal things. So on the educational side, you want to think about what type of research is being conducted in the program that you're at. Professors, of course, I can't stress that enough. You are applying not only to a school, but you are applying to work with a faculty person. So you want to make sure that you have those resources and that there are people there who are doing work that you're interested in. You also can look at the university department or faculty ranking as well to see, what the demographics of the faculty, right? And it was brought up in our panel, but their stance on diversity and inclusion, that could be important to you. You want to base that on your values and priorities. And so whatever those are, that's what you consider in this finding a graduate school that fits whatever those priorities are. So if family is most important to you, then you want to factor that in. If the professor is most important to you, which it should definitely be in your top 3 of your priorities, then you want to factor that in. Are there opportunities for interdisciplinary work? We're moving more now to a lot of collaborations across disciplines. And so it may be important or advantageous to choose a program that will allow you to get your feet wet in doing interdisciplinary work. And then are there even openings in research labs in that department? There's nothing like getting all excited, like I want to go to this school and nobody's taking students in that department. So you want to consider that as well. On a personal side, look at the quality of life for graduate students. So is the stipend sufficient? Think about the cost of living. So, you know, a $30,000 award in New York spends a lot differently than a $30,000 award in Texas. So definitely factor that in making your decisions. Are there health benefits? What are some other educational expenses, fees and tuition and so forth? How is that going to be covered? And what is that going to look like? You may want to consider on a personal side, the geographic location. So I know for one, I've been raised in the South. While I have spent brief moments like Christmas break in cold weather in Minnesota and places like that, I can't see me going somewhere for 4 to 7 years and having to deal with the cold. And so for me, I don't think I would choose a school that's freezing. However, you may be the type of person that says, you know what, I love cold weather. So think about that. And not just weather-wise, but what's the life like there? You know, is there a city, if you like more big city versus rural? Like, think about that. What's your quality of life going to be like based on the location? Will you have, you know, a community that you can plug into? That was also mentioned in the panel. You know, someone chose a school because they were near a community that reminded them of their community at home, and they knew they could have that support system there. Think about the cultural environment, the culture of the institution. Are they student focused? You know, again, I mentioned diversity and inclusion. You know, do people work together in teams, or is it very competitive and cutthroat? Like, these are things you want to factor in when you're considering a grad school. Also, social and personal upkeep. So, you know, where can I go and get my hair done? Is there, you know, a barbershop? Or, you know, those are trivial things, but things to consider. If you're accustomed to certain things, you want to make sure that wherever you're going, you can still have access to some of those things. And are there opportunities for a spouse, if applicable? So next, we're going to deal with reaching out to prospective programs and faculty. This is so important. Dr. Kristen Williams coined the phrase "reach out to stand out," and I thought that was just such a great way to put it. But you have to reach out to stand out. This webinar is about reaching out. And so you will make an impression on faculty if you contact them in advance. So let's say, you know, you're interested in going to a certain program and you found a faculty person whose research is interesting. It is not, you know, uncommon to send an email, you know, to get more information. Let them know, I've looked at your website, I'm interested in your research, and ask for a quick meeting. Now, with everything being virtual, it's so easy to set up a Zoom call, right? And you can have those appointments. You can make those appointments virtually, sometimes even in person. I know prior to the virtual era, you could go and visit a university and meet with the faculty, meet with the staff. You could talk to current graduate students. That's something you still can do. A lot of times they'll post like their group and people who are in their group on their websites. So reach out to them, because the grad students will be honest with you in most cases about, you know, how it is working in that lab. Also, some schools, if you decide to go in person, they may pay for your travel to come. A lot of them have open houses and visits. And now, so even more, there are a lot of virtual open houses and visits. And so maximize these virtual meetings, you all, because you can essentially go to so many schools a lot. It'd be a lot easier now than it was prior to our, you know, virtual environment. You want to gather information about the community, housing options, resources, support. These are all things that you can find out about on your visits. And of course, be on time, which is early, and be prepared when you go. And lastly, know that when you are interviewing faculty, it's a two-way interview, right? And the graduate students, you are finding out more about them just like they're finding out about you. You're trying to see if they're a good match for you, just like they're trying to see if you're a good fit for their program. So it's definitely a two-way interview. Now, in terms of your list for the portfolio, I recommend you find at least 10 schools or programs that fit your interests. And it's a great idea if you want to get a spreadsheet and kind of get all of this together to keep it organized. But you want to have the name of the graduate program or school, the advisors that you're interested in, any available resources. So let's say you're interested in unique research that requires like a specific type of equipment or let's say they just have this really cool piece of equipment and they're one of 5 schools in the country that will give you access to work on a particular research based on the technology and stuff that they have. That's something you may want to make note of. You also want to look at your admission requirements in the timeline so that you can plan accordingly for applying. Look at the strengths and emphasis, both in the academic program and also in research. So what are they more focused on? Or what is that program known for? Those are things to consider. And then, of course, I mentioned the application fees and also the application components. So are they asking for a general personal statement, or are they asking for more specific information and specific questions that you need to provide? Definitely weigh the pros and cons of the program. And also you want to make note of a contact person and make sure you get their information. So at this time, I want you just to take 1 minute to write down your hit list. I don't know if you guys have thought about some programs or faculty that you're interested in working with, and you can do that on a sheet of paper, but just kind of jot down who are some people in terms of faculty that's on your hit list, and then what are some schools and programs that's on your hit list. And if you want to share 1 or 2, you can feel free to do that. Anybody care to share? Have you guys given some thought to schools and programs, in fact, potential faculty you'll want to work with?
I have given some thought to it before. I would say, well, I have like a whole list of 20 schools, but my top program would probably be the psychology department in Duke University. And I have mostly paid attention to the faculty members there who have labs. But yeah, you kind of giving us more information about what to consider has definitely kind of opened my mind to, oh, I need to consider some other information about the program for sure, other than just like the advisor that I would have.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you for sharing, Claire. And so this is great. I encourage you to continue to build that list. You're certainly not limited to 10, but you don't want to just have 1 or 2 schools on your list. And especially if you feel like, I know some of you had some concerns with grades and is my package strong enough? You know, if you cast your net out wide enough and you apply for as many schools as you can, or that you can afford to apply for, and also you can still reach out to get waivers. Even if you don't go to a conference, you can reach out and see if there are application fee waivers. Don't let that deter you from applying, but cast your net as wide as you can. So the more schools, the programs that you're interested in, I wouldn't just have random stuff. Like, you want to have schools and faculty members that you can definitely see yourself working with, the better. And so let's move into recommendations. You all, recommendations make or break your application. I cannot stress that enough. And the time to develop the relationships with people who will potentially be your recommenders is now. Like, when you, I don't know what level most of you all are at, but you know, as soon as you set foot on campus, and even before, I know some people that rely on high school teachers and things like that, but ideally, a lot of your recommenders are going to come from people you have either worked for, you've done research with, and so forth as an undergraduate. So you want to identify and secure at least 3 to 4 recommenders. Most applications require 3 recommenders. And so you want to have that and have backups if possible. And so who should you ask? Who should you be thinking about? And again, these need to be people that know you well enough to write you a strong letter of recommendation. So definitely, if you're conducting research, your current advisor should be a recommender. As a matter of fact, it can be a red flag if you are currently conducting research with an advisor and they don't write a letter for you. And that has happened on a rare occasion. It was because it wasn't a great situation between the two. And we had to kind of speak to that. But in general, you want to make sure that your advisor is in a position to give you a strong recommendation. You should, so at least 2 of those should be in your field. And that depends on the field. You can also use an REU person that you work with. That's why when you have those summer experiences, make sure that you go in there, you know, and really shine and do what you need to do and develop a relationship. Keep in touch with them because you'll need them to be recommenders later. You can also have a scholarship program director. As a program manager for our LAMP program here, I have written recommendations over the years for hundreds and hundreds of students. And it has been very helpful to those students to be able to give them a different perspective other than something that their research advisor may do. I'm able to kind of write more holistically about the student. And let's see, I think someone had a question here. I'm working on 2 screens here. So do you recommend trying to get a recommendation letter from my first year professors? All of my classes are upwards of 200 to 300 people. So I think it's a little difficult to develop a relationship with one. So I would say you want to choose people. So let's say if you don't have research, Lily, I don't know, are you conducting undergraduate research right now? Lily? Not yet. Okay, you're a freshman. So you are very early on. The beautiful part about being a freshman, Lily, is you have adequate time to develop those relationships. But let's say right now, if you're looking at applying for REU programs or scholarships, yes, I would say definitely develop those relationships with your faculty. But if you have developed relationships with high school teachers at this point, since you're a freshman, and say if you want to apply for something now as a freshman, it's totally okay to ask your high school teachers and people you interacted with at the high school level that may know you better. It's totally fine at this level because you're a freshman to ask them for letters. Now, as you matriculate on, your goal should be to secure undergraduate research and develop relationships with some of your faculty. Maybe a teacher, and you take a class as you start moving to your upper level classes. You will be able to develop a better relationship with those faculty because the classes tend to be a little bit smaller. So I hope that answers your question. And you want to also keep in mind that you can have recommenders who can speak to specific areas. So I gave the example of, as a scholarship director, I'm able to write a letter for our students in our scholarship program that talks about how they serve as mentors in the program and how they are dedicated to, you know, the activities. And I also can talk about, you know, how they perform academically as researchers. I can talk about any areas of concern that they may have had as well. And so I can speak to one thing, whereas another advisor might speak to something else. I've had students specifically say, hey, can you highlight my community service and this, that, and the other, because my other advisor is going to talk about, you know, my research and, you know, me working on an independent project. So keep that in mind in selecting recommenders. She said, are TAs allowed to write letters of recommendation? That's a great question. So somebody else may want to chime in. I've seen that happen before too, but if possible, if it can be a joint letter, usually I'll have like the TA and then whoever the grad advisor maybe that could speak, you know, that's over them, or the faculty person over them, if they can maybe co-write the letter. It just depends on what it's for. I would say if it's for graduate school, you really want to try to get a faculty member or a scholarship or program director write the letter. But for like, you know, scholarships and things like that, since you're a freshman, Lily, I think it's fine for a TA to do that if you've been in class and they taught you in that particular class. Claire says, personally, I've used recommendation letters from first year professors during my first 2 years, but then used letters from upper division professors later on. Yes, exactly, because they had a better relationship. Monisha is asking, for rec letters, will each program have a different template for it, or can professors just write a basic letter? Great question, Monisha. And so it varies depending on the program. There are some programs where, as recommenders, they have very specific questions they want you to make sure you cover in your letter, or they may have you have a letter and answer additional questions. They may have a rating form of some sort where they have different categories and they have to rank you or give you a rating. They kind of do a more quantitative recommendation in addition to a letter. So it all depends on the program. And so that leads into the next section here, when you're asking for the letters, you want to make sure you ask for a strong letter of recommendation. Exact words. Y'all might want to write that down. You don't want to ask for a letter of recommendation. You want to ask for a strong letter of recommendation. Why do I say that? Anybody can write you a letter, but the thing that's going to get you, a strong letter is asking for a strong, and you want to know they may, and if you can do it in person, that's better because you can kind of see their reaction, and if not, they'll tell you like whether or not they can. Because most people in general, faculty don't want to write students a bad letter. Like you don't want to have somebody not give you a strong letter. And it's just this general letter of things that people can find elsewhere in your application. You want it to kind of be someone who knows a little bit about you and they can write one, and at least give them 1 month in advance. Okay. Next, you want to give them details about you. So I have a form that I have students fill out, and they have to complete that to recommend, to get a letter of recommendation, so that I can have everything that I need to really make it personal. I always know things about the student, but it also helps if you provide details and do the grunt work. So I know a lot of things are virtual now, but if there are some programs that are old school and they have to mail something in, go ahead and provide the stamped envelope. If there's a form you need to sign, sometimes you have to sign a form. Go ahead and do that. Make it easy for them. Provide your personal statement, your resume, your CV, and or a proposal if it's for a fellowship. You want them to have copies of those things, because some recommendations, like for the National Science Foundation Graduate Research Fellowship, the recommender actually has to speak to whether or not they feel you're able to successfully carry out their proposal. So they'll need the proposal to be able to make comments about it. You want to send reminders at least 1 to 2 weeks in advance. Always follow up also with the programs to confirm receipt. So if possible, if the recommenders can submit the letters a little bit sooner than the deadline, that's great. That way you can confirm, but you want to follow up with them, follow up with the program to make sure they got it. And always send a thank you note. You guys, thank you notes are a lost art, and they go a long way. So Monisha, you said you don't want to annoy your professors by asking them for multiple rec letters. So typically, I know as far as me, I've had students ask me for 10 letters, for different programs. And what I typically do is I have a general letter for the student. So a very, very comprehensive base letter. And once I write that one letter, it just evolves. So many of my students start with me as freshmen, and I have a letter. And then as they progress through the program and get more experiences, I keep adding to the letter, and I just tailor it for the different programs. And so if there's a program that wants me to answer a certain question that may not be captured in that basic letter, all I have to do is just tweak that. And so most of your faculty can do that. But if you give them things and it's really organized, like give them, here's the program, here's the deadline, here's how you submit it, make it easy for you. You may want to even give them a little spreadsheet if you have multiple letters. They will really appreciate that, and they can do the tweaking of that one base letter. Does that make sense, Monisha? All right, now let's move to personal statements. So that's the next piece in your portfolio. And this is the opportunity for you to really shine. So we're gonna go over what a personal statement is and what it's not. Now, I have given an entire webinar on personal statements that, I can see if I can get that to you guys, particularly those at LSU, because it's kind of an internal webinar that we did. So if you're interested, let me know so that you guys can see that. But I did take some of the highlights to include here. But a personal statement is a picture. It's a picture of who you are. It's also an invitation. It's an indication of your priorities and judgment. And it's a story, but more specifically, it's your story. Now, what it is not, it's not an academic paper about you, although it may be tempting because we're used to, writing academic papers and so forth. It's not a narrative resume. So you're not just simply restating what they can find on a resume. And then also, it is not a journal entry. So while it's personal, it's not TMI personal. You don't want to give too much information. And it's also not a plea or a justification. And so you may have situations where maybe you had to sit out a semester, or you know, you may have had a challenge. It's not your time to just beg and plead for them to let you, you know, in this particular program. That's not the way you want to handle that. And then lastly, it's not a lie. So you have to be authentic when you are crafting your personal statement. You don't want to tell them just what you think they want to hear. You want to be your authentic self. So some general ground rules for it. Number one, you are in total control. So unlike, you know, your recommendation letter, while you have some control in that, depending on the quality of the relationship that you've built with your recommender and your work ethic and all those other great characteristics that you've exhibited that they've observed, you still don't have that much control, right? You don't have a whole lot of control over a grade that's already done. It's on your transcript. It is what it is, right? You don't have a lot of control over tests that have already been taken. So your GRE scores and things of that nature. There's not much control over that, but you are in control of your story. And you can decide to put in there what you like to put in there that's going to get the readers or the committee members, give them a glimpse as to who you are, what your goals are, and how you're a fit for their program. So having said that, your words have power. And so I want you guys to own that when you are crafting your statements. Don't underestimate the power of your words. If your statements could talk, what would they say? So save the cookie cutters for baking. I tell students all the time, you don't want it to sound like everybody else's, because the truth of the matter is they're going to be reading a ton of these statements. And so you want yours to stand out. Procrastination is your enemy. You can't wait to the last minute, particularly for fellowships. A lot of the fellowships require more than just a simple statement. So like the NSF fellowship, you actually have to write a research proposal. And so you can't wait to the last minute to work on your statement, and you don't have time to work on some of the other components. And you want to give yourself time to edit. Your tribe members are your friends. So who's your support system? Your faculty members, your family, your friends, graduate students, peers. These folks are there to help you, and they can definitely give you some valuable feedback. And when you get that feedback, embrace it. Don't be afraid of, red markups and things like that on your statement. It's only going to make you better. And lastly, you can definitely do it. You can definitely put together a statement that will be amazing. So this is what the overall message of your statement should convey. So one, that you can write, that you know yourself, your field, your program, or your department, that you have specific interests that are a good fit for whatever it is that you're writing the statement for, that those interests come from a real place. So again, it's authentic. You're not just, telling a story just because you think they want to hear this story, and that you have some idea of what you want to study and do. You might not have all the details, but you have some idea. And also that you've encountered and overcome challenges, that you're prepared both academically and emotionally, particularly for grad school. Grad school is a time, when you're going to be going through a lot. You're going to be growing and learning. And so they want to know that you are emotionally able to handle, the rigor of grad school. Also that you're committed, that you value ethics and you do things the right way, that you're confident but not arrogant. And then lastly, you are worth investing in because you'll succeed, you'll contribute to the program and ultimately the field. Now, this is not to say you're going to explicitly say all of these things, but that's the tone of your statement. This is where you have the opportunity to show, not tell. So in telling certain anecdotes and sharing some of your experiences, this is kind of the underlying message that your statement should convey. So when you do this, there are a number of questions that you can answer, you guys. And again, I have tons of resources on this, but this is just a Cliff Notes version of it. You want to make sure that your statement is polished and that it's tailored for each program. Don't fall into the trap of trying to force a statement that you've written for X program to work for a Y program. That can be a big mistake. And please check and make sure you change the names at least. I've seen students submit, applications to Duke and they had Texas A&M on there. Like, you want to make sure you got the right program and everything is tailored, because they may ask specific questions and you want to make sure that you answer those. Also think about why you are fascinated by your research and or discipline. In general, everybody wants to know that. Why are you even interested in this field? Respond to any specific questions. What personal or individual strengths make you a qualified applicant? And then lastly, why did you choose grad school and what are your career goals? So again, there are other questions that you can answer, but this is just the basics. And there are a ton of resources that you can use for personal statements as well. So in terms of your research synopsis, research, you guys, is a wonderful way to stand out. For those of you who are younger, I know Lily is a freshman. Lily, if you're not in research, get involved in research. And anyone else, you can be a sophomore, junior. It's never too late to start. It's a great way to stand out, but then also it helps you in your undergraduate studies, right? So you're able to see the information that you're learning in the classroom. It's more hands-on. You're able to apply some of that knowledge. And so definitely do that. And if you have research, you want to showcase that. Make sure that that shines and you're able to talk about what it is you've done, what your contributions are. And it's better to have significant contributions to a few projects rather than have, you know, multiple projects where, let's say, you know, I wash glassware, or you just did a lot of data entry and that type of thing. That's not, you might start off doing that when you first start, but that's not something that you should be doing long-term. You want to find research where you can actually make a significant contribution. And then when you write these synopses, you want to summarize your productive academic year and summer research. So in that, you can structure it to whereas you have your project title or your area. You can indicate, you know, if you work independently, say that if it's an independent project that you were given versus a group. You want to summarize what it is that you were doing in that project. What's the goal of the project? What's the application of your research? So important to include that. And then what were some of the findings of that as well? If you have done any presentations or if you have any publications, that definitely needs to go into your research synopsis as well. You want to emphasize your experiences, the skills you've gained. If you have any sort of novel expertise that you've gained as a researcher, definitely showcase that. And always a good idea to work with your faculty research advisor and give feedback. This particular piece is something you want to work hand in hand with your graduate student that you're working with and your faculty person, because in many cases, they might have to sign off on some of this stuff, right? And endorse that. Some of you guys might be working with like sensitive information or confidential research. And so you want to make sure that you're putting out information that's allowed to be put out, and they can better guide you on how to craft a synopsis of your work. And so in looking at your resume or your CV, these documents are selling documents. Again, it's a way to stand out. And so you want to make sure that it's polished, it's flawless, and develop a comprehensive one. So that one's going to have everything but the kitchen sink in it, right? And then as you apply for the different programs, you can then tailor it and condense it based on those programs. Now, will you turn this in all the time and submit like your finished resume or CV? Not all the time, but you will be pulling information off of there to use in your applications. So that's why it's important to keep track of your dates, locations that you've done research experiences or jobs you've had, you know, any type of references or contact information, hours of service per task. You know, if you're someone who's done a lot of community service, it would be great if you could quantify that, you know, and be able to showcase that. Be sure to include your publications and presentations. If you have those are golden. That's currency, you know, to be able to have a publication, especially as an undergraduate. So make sure that you cite that and you have your publication listed. It doesn't matter if you're first author, if you're like fifth author, put it on there. Also use strong verbs to describe your tasks and skills. And you can find these resources online, some of the verbs that you can use for that, but you want to make sure that you're incorporating that in your CV or resume. And note how you directly contributed to the projects. So if your role was to, you know, optimize a protocol, and that's what you did, you want to make sure that you say that. If you were able to save resources, you save time, you save money as a result of your work, you were able to come up with, you know, a new way of doing something, make sure you put what your direct contribution was, and definitely use your resources. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the Purdue Online Writing Lab. It's called the Purdue OWL, but they have a wealth of resources, not just for resumes and CVs, but anything that has everything to do with writing, personal statements, papers, you name it. That resource has been around for many decades, and they have a ton of resources that you can use to help. Now, in looking at funding, this is the big piece. So I told you guys that if you go to school in STEM to get your PhD, you get paid. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that. I want you guys to seek out at least 5 funding sources, okay? And again, you can do this in the form of a spreadsheet, but keep it organized. So maybe it's that you have your schools list on a tab, and you have funding on another tab, and you have, you know, programs or whatnot, specific faculty you want to reach out to, whatever those are, keep it all organized. And on this, you want to seek out at least 5 funding sources. You want to include the name of the fellowship, the grant, or the funding source. You want to have a 1 to 2 sentence summary or description. That's so important because you're going to have so many of them. You don't want to get them confused. You want to know what are the expectations of those programs. So what are the eligibility requirements? They will vary from funding option to funding option. What are the application components needed? Do you need a personal statement only and then a basic application and 3 recommendation letters? Or do you need 4 recommendation letters and an actual proposal in addition to that, in addition to research, a summary of your research? So figure out what it is that they want and make sure you include that on your spreadsheet. What are the deadlines? And here's where I will caution you to put their deadline, but give yourself a deadline that's well in advance of their deadline, because so many things can happen along the way. A lot of these statements take time, but I will say, if you prepare a fellowship application for one of your more exhaustive, extensive fellowships like an NSF fellowship, that's probably the most work you'll have to do for a fellowship. And you can use that as a good basis for applying for other awards. Also, any contact information of a person. So you may have questions that you haven't found the answers to on their website and in your research, and you might have to contact someone. Good idea to put that there. And the benefits and details. So what are you going to get from that fellowship should you be awarded? What's the stipend amount? What does it cover? Also, what are the expectations of awardees? Some of these fellowships require that you do, an internship like the GEM fellowship. There's different expectations that may be required of you, or you may have to submit something or do something special as an awardee. So find out what that is and include that as well. And so in looking at the types of grad school funding, you have your grants. So that's the fellowships are the most common. That's money that you don't have to pay back. This is free money. And then you also have assistantships. They're the most common form of funding. And so with this, you're going to receive a stipend. Tuition is usually waived. You might have other benefits. You can get a research assistantship, a teaching assistantship, or some admin or professional type position. But this will help you pay for school. Now, if you get a teaching assistantship, somebody mentioned getting a letter from their TA. So that TA is someone who is a graduate student that is getting paid, but in order for them to get paid, they also teach, right? And so I would say, at a minimum, you should get an assistantship, but definitely apply for fellowships, because the benefit of having a fellowship is that you're not bound to teaching, right? And that money is attached to you and not in a particular institution. And so if you get a fellowship, you can say, hey, I can go to whatever school I want to go to with this particular fellowship. And it's usually more money, and you don't have to teach. Not that there's anything wrong with teaching. There's a great set of skills that you can develop in doing that, but that's just something to consider. All right, Pathways to Science. Yes, that is a great resource that somebody put in here. And we'll have some other resources as well. But thank you, Martha, for dropping that link in. There's also loans. Although I will say once again, in STEM, getting your PhD, you really shouldn't need to take out a loan, but that is available, and you would complete a FAFSA form for that, an application for that. And then there are also scholarships. So you might have, college-based awards. And so your university may have specific scholarships that they give out. There may be career-specific awards. Sometimes organizations, like professional organizations that are affiliated with certain fields, they may also offer scholarships. Sometimes Greek organizations offer scholarships. So definitely, look out there, because there is a lot of money that's available. And so when you're looking at pursuing fellowships, you want to make sure that you have a match in these 4 areas. So money. So that means that, that research funding is available. It can actually support your endeavors. They can be internal or external of your department or desired institution. You want to look at eligibility. So that means that you meet the requirements, but that also you are ready to tackle the fellowship process in actually applying for it. You want to make sure that there's a match. That's very important, to make sure that your research interests connect with the funder's interests. And then lastly, time. And so in order to put together a competitive proposal, you have to have time to be able to do that. And so you want to make sure that you have adequate planning and preparation that you've allotted for that. So where's the money? Again, we talked about colleges, departments, of programs. Check with your graduate school or the Office of Graduate Studies. Look at other organizations, government agencies, foundations, professional organizations. These are also great databases in addition to the pathways to science. So Johns Hopkins has a great database for funding opportunities. Also, ProFellow has one. And specifically here at LSU, you can utilize the list that the Honors College has posted on fellowships. And then the graduate school itself has a ton of financial aid options that you can check out. And in doing that, you also want to consider eligibility requirements because they're going to vary. The application process will vary, and most funding is available in the fall semester. And so you want to make sure that you're aware of that. You want to apply for the right type of fellowship or award. So I'm sorry, let me turn this down. That's our landline. I apologize for that. You want to make sure you apply for the right type. So which stage are you at? There's early fellowships, pre-doctoral fellowships, dissertation fellowships, analysis write-up, and postdoctoral. So that's, just fancy ways of saying that different stages. I put up the timeline. There are some fellowships that will give you awards at those different stages. And so just because you might get, say, an NSF fellowship in the beginning, don't forget that you can maybe come back and apply for fellowships that come about for those who are specifically writing up their dissertation. And you can get further funding for the rest of your time while you're in school. You also want to make sure that you know about the GPA or any type of required experiences that you have. Is a proposal required, like for the NSF? Are there internships or other requirements? Now you want to look into, are you a good fit for the funding agency? And so does your research match the objectives of those agencies? Are you at the right point for your opportunity, right point in your career? Let's say if you're in your career now and going back, are you able to do that? And then how will that fellowship give you the necessary skills or experiences for your academic journey? Will it give you adequate financial support? So take into account cost of living, travel, insurance, supplies. So if you want to be able to present at conferences, what are the opportunities that are available to be able to do that? And then do you have the time to prepare an adequate competitive application? And definitely get some feedback if you're wondering if you're a good match. But I say you can't win a fellowship that you don't apply to, right? And don't assume that you won't, make the cut, because it varies from year to year in looking at the various pools, applicant pools. So don't disqualify yourself for any award. And as far as time, start early, do your research. Make sure you're organized and you create and you evaluate that timeline. And you may have to shift and reorganize that timeline. Know the submission cycles and make sure you not only start early, but that you also submit early, because what happens is people at the very end, a lot of times they're all trying to submit at the deadline. If it's due at 5 o'clock, everybody's on there at 4:55 trying to submit. You can have a lot of issues with that, you know, in terms of the speed of being able to submit, and technical things can happen because so many people are trying to submit at the same time. Don't get caught in that, because fellowships, I will say for sure, are very hardcore about their deadlines. If you miss the deadline, you miss the deadline. And then can you reapply? So there are some fellowships where you can apply, let's say, as coming out of your undergraduate study. So as a senior, you can apply for, say, the NSF fellowship, and then you can apply again. Should you not receive it, you can apply again your first year as a graduate student. So know if they have that possibility as well, because that can help you practice. You know, hopefully you get it as an undergraduate, but if you don't, you will have at least gone through the process and you have an idea of what to do to better your application the next time. And here are just a few examples of some fellowships. Like I said, there are a ton, but I just highlighted a few. So as you can see, the Hertz Foundation Fellowship, that's for PhD students that are interested in biological, physical, and engineering sciences. And that's a 5-year award. It's a $34,000 9-month stipend. You get tuition. And so really, really good fellowship. For Foundation Fellowship, those are for people who are interested in becoming professors. And so you can see the support there. I've talked about the NSF Fellowship a lot. That's one that for sure, LSU specifically, we have had a lot of students successfully win that fellowship, but it's very lucrative. So you definitely can check that one out. And then there's a fellowship from the NIH as well, the Ruth L. Kirstein National Research Service Award Predoctoral Fellowship. And that's for health-related research. And so these are just a few, like I said, but there are so many that you can apply for. And then lastly, we have a USDA fellowship as well. That one is really, really competitive. But again, you can't win a fellowship that you don't apply to. So I definitely encourage you to check those out. Now, as we get ready to close, here's just a little lanyard here. So in Louisiana, for those, I don't know where you guys are from that are on here, but in Louisiana, we call a little lanyard. It's a little extra, little bonus. And so you may be in the position where you have to do an interview. And so I did want to put a little bit about just some interview tips because especially with the virtual setting, it's very easy to do an interview now. You know, you still may have to be called out, but definitely make sure you treat it as if it were an in-person interview if you were virtual. So do your homework on the college, the department, and yourself. So if you have put something in your application, make sure that you're aware of everything that you stated that you wanted to do. It's nothing like them asking you a question about something in your application and you're stumbling like, oh, did I say that? Make sure you know what you said. And then you want to have an informed and well thought out sense of purpose. So knowing what you want to do and why, specifically, not abstractly, if at all possible. But if you're not certain about what you want, you can definitely seek experiences that can help you determine your path. And practice, you all. Use your advisors, mentors, relatives, friends, or your career center to practice interviews. Some career centers offer mock interview opportunities. So take advantage of those. You want to keep up with the current work in your field and even outside of your immediate research. So that's where those departmental seminars and reading articles come in handy. Know who the major players are. So group meetings and talking with your advisor and grad students and postdocs are helpful. And then know the basic paths of professional paths in your field. So how long does it generally take to get a PhD in your area? What are those expectations in terms of a postdoc? So maybe you're getting your PhD, but in your field, most people go and do postdoctoral research. They don't go straight in and get a job. So it's a good idea to know that. And what is a competitive publication record at the PhD level in your field in terms of publishing? Where does the majority of research funding also come from in your area? So these are helpful things to know. And of course, the unspokens, dressing for success. So even if it's a Zoom call, you want to make sure that you're looking professional, and that you've done everything you would do if you were in person, if it were virtual. Now, here's the fine print in terms of a little lanyard. Again, start early. I think I've said that 1,000 times in this webinar, but it's key. And begin with the end in mind. The goal is for you to what? Get into a graduate program working with a faculty person that you would enjoy, right? And the goal is for you to ultimately receive your PhD. And so knowing that that's your goal, that should compel you to want to start early. And when you're talking about these fellowships paying you $30,000, $40,000, that's not going to be something that you can just throw together the night before, right? You have to put that much of effort into an application for those. Use your resources. And what I mean by that is, if you were to call a program with a question that they have answers to on their website, that would not be a favorable look for you. And so make sure that you've exhausted your resources and that you've done your due diligence and read, because a lot of stuff they put on the website, they put it in the description. So make sure you read things carefully before you start asking questions about it. Allow adequate time for mishaps. And so maybe your GRE scores might get lost, or your transcript request might, require a certain process, or any other supplemental material. You want to make sure you give yourself enough time for that. Do everything with the spirit of excellence. That's, again, when you're talking about applying, there are certain things that you can't control in your application, but there are things that you can. And the quality of what you submit is one of those things. You are always being evaluated. That's the unspoken fine print. So from the interview process, from sending an email to get more information about something, or making that phone call, reaching out to the faculty person or the graduate student to get more information, know that they are evaluating you just as you are evaluating them, even though they might not say, oh, this is your formal interview. So all of the interactions are important. And lastly, treat everyone with respect. And I put this in here because oftentimes students, they make a phone call, they might be talking to the administrative professional or the support staff, and they may, see them as someone who's insignificant in that process. You guys, your support staff, can also make or break you being accepted into a graduate program. So make sure that you treat them with respect. And it's a good idea, if they were very helpful, send them a thank you note, send them a thank you email. That goes a long way. Lastly, to stand out, you got to know yourself, be authentic, highlight your strengths, master telling your story. Do a lot of research on what it is that, your program is about, but then also undergraduate research. Make sure you get involved with that. Exceed the norm. So the time dedicated, the number of applications submitted, you can exceed that above what the average person is doing to make yourself stand out. Use your support system and resources. Be bold and apply. So overcome those fears. Make connections, because your connections can also be very helpful. I know students who've gotten into graduate programs simply because they expressed to their advisor or a teacher or faculty person that they were interested in a certain program or a certain faculty, and they happen to know that person and they made the phone call. Or you participated in a summer research experience with a faculty person and they loved working with you, and you said, hey, I'd love to come and do graduate study here. You're good as in, because if a faculty person wants you, that's a simple phone call to the grad admissions office saying, hey, I want this student, and you're just submitting an application. And again, start early and submit early. So with that, are there any questions? I do see some that have popped up. Lily says, do you know where I can find more information on applying to PhD programs outside of the US? That's a good question. Are there major differences between the US and outside of the US? That's an excellent question. I'm uncertain of specific programs, Lily, but you can certainly do a search, do a Google search, and type in some programs if there's like a specific school that you might be interested in outside of the US you can apply for. I'm sure that there are some differences between the two, but in general, a lot of them are, very similar. You'll find some of the components similar. And then where on the website will it be posted? Dr. Marco can provide some insight on that.
Yeah, there's a resources tab. And if you go to lspacmodels.org, you'll see it, and we'll put it there. So I'll send an email out when it's up, and I'll put a link so you all have it.
That's great. Any other questions? You can either drop it in the chat, or if you want to unmute and ask, feel free to do so.
I have two questions, actually. My first question is you mentioned the webinar about the statement of purpose for like internal LSU students.
Yes.
Can we email you? Because I go to LSU. Could I just email you for that, or how should I go about that?
Yes. I'm gonna drop my email in the chat here.
And then my second question, I don't know if you guys can provide insight on this, but I have a list of schools and professors to reach out to that I might be interested in conducting research with. Some of them list on their websites if they're accepting new students or they're looking for new students. So it's clear like I should email them, but on other professors' websites, I really can't find that information. So it's like, do I reach out to those professors even if they aren't clearly stating they're looking for looking for PhD students to like work with them, or because I know sometimes you won't even hear back from professors if you do reach out to them. Like sometimes the email might get lost or they just are so busy. So I don't know if you can provide insight if like that's something I should still do.
Yes.
Reach out to them. Yeah.
Yes, I would say definitely reach out to them if it's not clear. And again, in the same way you would contact the other ones, you can let them know that you're applying for graduate school and that you came across their website, you're interested in their research, and you wanted to know if they were accepting students. If you don't hear back from them, you may also try to maybe reach out to the grad admissions office or the department to see if someone in the department may be aware of whether or not a particular faculty person is accepting students.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say on that, it can't hurt to reach out. And you may not get a reply because sometimes they are very busy, but sometimes they have read your email. And I think it's always good to have your name there in their mind. So when they see an application that, they have seen your name before, you don't want to spam them by sending them a ton of emails, but I think it's always good to reach out, even if you don't know if they're accepting students.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, great question. Anyone else? All right. Well, thank you all for your engagement and being attentive. And if you have any questions, definitely reach out to us. And again, apply. You cannot be accepted into a program that you don't apply to, and you can't win a fellowship for a fellowship that you don't apply to. So definitely go out there and do that. And if you need any assistance, we're definitely here to help you with that.
You miss 100% of the shots you don't take.
Yes, I like that.
Well, thank you all. We really appreciate you spending your afternoon with us. I hope you found this informative. I found it incredibly informative. Melissa, round of applause. Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys. It was a lot, but thank you. Thank you.
All right.
Hopefully it wasn't information overload, but digest it in small bites.
I thought it was great, and we'll make this available as well so people can digest it at their leisure. Awesome. All right.
All right.
Everybody, take care.
Have a great weekend.